For today, the 23rd of September 2020. I'd ask you to stand for Council Affirmation and Karakia, led by Malcolm.
Whakatakata te hau ki te uru. Whakatakata te hau ki te tonga. Kia marakina kina ki te uta. Kia mataratara ki tai. Ihei aki ana te akatakura. Hi tiu, hi huka, hi hei ha hou, ti hei Māori ora. Let us today affirm that as we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions, so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's points of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence, and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of Selwyn community and its communities. We will.
Thanks, Malcolm, for that. We have apologies from Councillor Reid today. Can I have a mover and seconder that we accept that apology? Alexander and Hassan. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? There it carries. There's been no identification of any urgent general business, David? Nothing you're aware of?
Nothing that I'm aware of, Mr. Mayor.
Any conflicts of interest that aren't generally known through the conflicts register? None. And public forum today, Ralph Scott is joining us. Ralph, thank you for coming along, representing Lincoln Community Committee. If you'd like to take a seat at the front. The microphone's in front of you, and the right-hand button just turns it on. Just press it once, and we allow about 10 minutes for this presentation, including some question and answers. And yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, so thank you first for the opportunity to be able to attend the meeting and to speak with you. Thanks also to Douglas Marshall for fronting a special meeting of the Lincoln Community Committee so we could air options and opinions, and he suggested that maybe I come along to this meeting today to present a wider view. Pardon me for reading this out, but I don't want to miss anything in the short time. I do want to emphasise that the community feedback was very strongly opposed to any development, and when we put the idea out there on Facebook, there were 240 comments that came very rapidly. 150 were opposed to any development at all, and also we got a number of emails from the community as a result of having it in the Lincoln Community News, and of those the majority were opposed to any development, and a smaller number were in favour of some restricted development. And I've come to represent those people and give voice to the people that are opposed to any development. However, I'll get onto a bit more detail later. I also represent the Lincoln Envirotown Trust on the LCC, and LET is strongly in favour of retaining as much of the grassed area as possible for future community use. The LCC acknowledges the need for Selwyn District Council to recover some funds from their investment via residential development, and I can see that. The purchase of the site was an intelligent investment, but let's not waste the opportunity that it gives us now. This is a historical site, former Moffat's Mill location broadly, and in the past it's been the centre of much community activity. The Lincoln Farmers Market started there, and it was a thriving hub early on. Many of the people enjoyed it and appreciated the new bridge access, but current fencing has prevented more enjoyment that might have been had during COVID. I suggest that many of the newer residents may not even be aware of this beautiful site or its historic importance to the district. So please take this opportunity while you have it to create a reserve that is big enough to be truly useful and functional in this special site. Picnic areas, maybe a playground, a big enough area so that people can really use it. Some exposure to the site due to the primary school tenure and COVID lockdown has occurred, but there's been no intentional promotion of this gem. So I'm suggesting that an area, approximately 30% of the area targeted for development, be retained in the meantime, perhaps as Moffat Square, Moffat Reserve, Moffat Historic Reserve, something like that. And you have a graphic in front of you, which is based on a graphic that was produced for the council. And I've drawn a line there, a rough idea of what I think might make a significant reserve. And so this is what I'm really asking you to think about. A lot of progress has been made, and there's been a lot of discussion about what might make a decent reserve. And I know that there's been progress on one of the residential lots being taken out of the development in the meantime. I'm asking for a little bit more of that on behalf of those people who wanted no development. But I see that a lot of development's going to happen, but let's see what we can do while we have this opportunity. The area I've suggested is measuring around about 40 metres long from the path to towards the Mills Pond Lane. You know, it's a bit arbitrary what makes a decent sized reserve, but I think just lot 6, and there was some question about the size of lot 6, which is why I decided to measure out an area and give that sort of scope rather than use the lot numbers. But lot 6 would not be sufficient, I don't think, for a decent reserve for family use. So I'm asking for just a little bit more than that. Sometime in the future, when the former Ellesmere Country Club building has ended its life and has been removed, as the Southern District Council has proposed, and that area be invested in the community, these areas that I'm asking to be put aside may be reviewed. But in the meantime, I think we need a decent sized reserve there so people come to identify with that in the special site. And I don't want to belittle the efforts have been made already to recognising there's a need for this. But I do see that if the wrong decisions are made now, that's it. You can't go back. Once it's become a residential development, it's lost. So please use this opportunity, be generous, don't be mean, and think about the future of this growing town. Thank you.
Good, Ralph. Thank you for that and for some of the history and ideas that you've brought in. There was questions from councillors. Councillor Lyle.
Yes, thanks for coming along, Ralph. I have been reminding councillors of this site for some time, and the fact that once we lose it forever. What's become apparent to me recently is the significance of the history of the area and the old mill pond. I did hear a rumour last weekend that somebody was looking at building a replica or wanting to build a replica of the mill. Can you tell me anything about that?
Yes, I think somebody approached Catherine Carriage with that idea. I think it was maybe Lions or Rotary or somebody like that, thinking this might be a nice thing to do. I think that might be a bit complicating. Mainly, I'm thinking that it's a historic site, and that we can represent that with the millstones that we already have in Mayenberg Square at the moment. And I understand that in the city, in the Avon River, the City Council installed a water wheel, but it became a problem. I think Grant was telling me about this, that it became, or maybe it was Douglas, that it was not functional, and it was an investment that was wasted, really. So it's the site, it's the usable site that I'm asking for. Thank you.
Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. Ralph, you acknowledged that the land was bought with district funds, not Lincoln funds, and that there is a trust holding a considerable money on the community's behalf in Lincoln. Could not that trust purchase lot 5 on behalf of the community, and thereby giving the land area that Lincoln community seeks, but using Lincoln investment in Lincoln funds, not district funds, in order to be sort of equitable across the district?
That's not a decision I can make. I can see what you're saying, but my main concern at this point is that I can see development is going to go ahead. It's going to go ahead quite quickly, and by the time it happens, it's going to be too late. The trees have already been cut down in that area, and I'm saying do something now while you can as a council Who pays for it isn't the issue at this stage. You've already invested in the site. You've got some return from that site. You deserve to get return back from that site by selling some of it, but don't sell it all at this stage until you know where you're going.
Would a compromise be if council was to retain ownership of lot 5, pending a purchase from the Lincoln community on behalf of the Lincoln community, which would seem to meet your saying, let's not sell it immediately, let's hold on to it and see if there's another purchaser, a community purchaser available?
I can't answer that really. I mean, that's a suggestion, but at this stage, I'm saying yes, hold on to it. I'm also saying that sometime in the future, the real gem is the site where the building is at the moment, and I understand that will be vested in the community, but that building is probably going to outlast me. So saying we're going to get something in the future doesn't help us for now. And so I'm really saying let's reserve what we can now for the benefit of the people that are here now, and not make any hasty decisions about selling it off for housing development when you probably don't need to.
Thank you, Douglas.
I'll just talk on the trust. The trustee, just briefly, I think you'll find, Councillor Alexander, that the trustee requires an income source from the lot. So the trustees would struggle to buy the lot without an income source offered. So I think it's a great idea, but and unfortunately the trustee will be restrictive on that basis.
Thank you. Any further questions of Ralph? Councillor Hassan.
Just a query with regards to lot 7. Have you had an opportunity to read the council agenda?
No, I haven't.
Right, because we have an item
No, I
on
haven't.
today's agenda with regards to how we secure lot 7 for the future, for the benefit of the community. So there are 3 options proposed basically, and the best one is probably to put a covenant on it. So there's the understanding that if it does get sold, then it has to be in consultation with the community. Are you in agreement with how that covenants would work, or have you got some ideas on how to secure that lot going into the future? That's the one with the country club on it.
I have no understanding of that, I'm afraid. I know there has been discussion about this, and that from an early discussion when this site was to be developed, the desire was that part of the site, lot 7, if you like, be retained for the community use, because that is the piece that is most surrounded by the water. However, it's occupied by a building, and the building is being well used. So I would hope that in the future that might become available to the community, but and using what mechanisms Selwyn District Council has to secure that, that's great. But right now we're just talking about these other lots that are going to be sold if we don't secure them in some way in the meantime.
Douglas?
Yeah, Ralph, just I'll make sure you get a copy, but I'm pretty sure we supplied a copy to the committee on Friday. So it's probably not in front of your committee for an item, but I'll come and see you at the end of this meeting, explain what we're doing so you can understand. And we found a very good mechanism for protection. So
Thank you, Douglas.
that doesn't get to your answer, but it gets lot 7 sorted.
Yes, I realise it's a little bit complicated, and I appreciate what the Selwyn District Council is doing to secure some of this land. And I'm just saying, let's do the best we can now while we have a chance.
Okay. Thank you for coming in and presenting that to us this afternoon. Councillors, we'll just bring that matter forward on the agenda. Douglas, if you're okay to present your property report early on in the meeting, and if you want to stay around, Ralph, for any discussion on that, not that you'll be a part of it, but you can witness what is said and done. We'll do that at the beginning of the meeting.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. We have the confirmation of minutes from I should mention Selwyn Youth Council's coming in later, so they will be public forum, but not now. Minutes of the meeting from the 9th of September. A move and a seconded, they're true and accurate. Moved Alexander, seconded Bland. Any discussion on those minutes? All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carries. Pages 22 through 26 is the District Planning Committee meeting held here on Wednesday the 4th of March. A move and a seconder for those minutes. McInnes and Lyle. Any discussion on those? All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. And then pages 27 through 31, it's the minutes of the District Plan Committee held 26th of August. A mover and a seconder, Epeha and Lyle. Any discussion on those? All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. Item on the report for action and action required, assumptions and uncertainties for the 2021-2031 long-term plan and activity management plans coming back at the end of next month, which brings us to the first of our reports, which will take the Chief Executive first. David, just because your stuff's there, and then Douglas will have your report straight after that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, the basis of this report is for information of the public, just to bring everybody up to speed with a number of things that are ongoing at the moment, the exception being the first item, which is seeking Council's endorsement for terms of reference for the Westview Special Fund Committee establishment and adoption of those terms of reference. As I noted in the report, this has been well discussed with the community board on a number of occasions. They are unanimously in support of the proposals. As you can see, the first meeting of the committee is scheduled in mid-October. And just by way of background, the sum of money we're talking about in this fund at the moment is in the vicinity of around $1.3 million. And it's pretty clearly understood what the objectives of that fund are and the area of benefit for that. We have written to the two Darfield-based committees, just advising them to provide names of people who will sit on that committee, and we await their response. Pages 33, 34, 35, and top of page 36 set out those public consultations that we are currently involved in or that are forthcoming. And point is that there's a lot of information we're seeking from our community. We're pretty active out there at the moment. There are links through the report to the surveys and information, and each of those Mr. Mayor will in due course, of course, be coming back to the community. Key one following on from this morning's second workshop on LTP is the reference on page 35 to the pre-long-term plan consultation, just in terms of areas of priority, affordability and direction. The animals bylaw consultation and Upper Selwyn huts are proposed to take place over the next 4 to 6 weeks. Also on page 36, for information of the community, I've alerted everybody to the construction of the new electric car charging stations that are being constructed, so they'll be well in place before Christmas. And then some proposed changes, Mr. Mayor, to the delegations manual as a result of some staff changes and title changes. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. I have a number of questions regarding the Westview committee guidelines. First of which committee, they're all under committee membership. It's just for clarity. It talks about appointing ward councillors and Melbourne community board members for a 3-year term, but that's effectively only 2 years for the rest of this triennium and then reappointed after the next election. It talks about the appointment of a Darfield Recreation and Community Centre Management Committee for a member for a 3-year term. Is that also subject to council's upcoming review of community committees? We appoint somebody for a 3-year term this month and the committee from which they are appointed is restructured or reconstituted. Where does that leave it sitting? And finally, the document is not clear and it does not specify how the committee chair is to be appointed and whether or not there will be a deputy chair. Some council subcommittees have specified that it must be a councillor to be chair of the committee. Some I'm familiar with have specified that it must be a councillor or community board member. This document is silent on that. And I assume, given that this is a subcommittee of council, that council laws would have speaking rights at any meetings of this committee. It's not clear in the document.
So you've raised a number of questions. So going top to bottom, firstly, with respect to the ward councillors and the community board members, for a 3-year term is of course the electoral period. So we are well into that at this stage. With respect to the next two, which are the Darfield Township Committee and the Rec and Community Centre Committee. They are written on the basis of what we know now. Yes, there is potentially some changes to those committees, but at the moment, they will be elected by those bodies who they represent for that period of time. If there are changes to that governance model in the future, that will be reflected. Quite deliberate not to have guidance around election of the chair. As the author of the terms of reference, there is no preference. This is a new committee which has got some quite specific tasks. Acknowledging that the fund has been there for a wee while, there have been certain suggestions on how it may be utilised and where the areas of benefit might be. So I'm not hard and fast around rules and regulations. Suffice to say that the agenda, which has been written for the first meeting, sees me doing the introduction and calling for election nominations to the position of chair and then election of chair. With respect to reporting, as I state on the bottom of page 42, the chair will formally report to council and MCB. And in terms of attendance at the meeting, if they are public meetings, of course, they are open to anybody, not just elected members.
Thank you. Grant.
I guess I saw this paper and being a non-Melbourne ward councillor was, I guess, needed a wee bit more background, and I hope you might indulge me. What is the existing governance arrangements? I mean, what's going to happen to the current governors? Are they discharged? Are they no longer required? Is there a governance team there? From a basic point of view, is this a council fund to administer? Do we have rights to set up terms of reference and actually administer this fund? So those are the key questions that I'd like to understand.
So dealing with your last question first, yes, we do, because the funds held are held on behalf of the community grant. So yes, we do have that role and responsibility. The fund was formed in the year 2014. There has been no formal meeting of the governance group. There have been assertions as to where that governance might be. And that was the root of the discussions initially with the community board. Those discussions were then sent to the two committees, or certainly at least one of the committees, to get their feedback, which was considered for the second iteration, which was taken back to the community board and adopted. So it's around best practice for what's a really significant fund, 1.3 mil. As I say, it was accumulated by the sale of an asset specifically for the purposes of benefiting the township of Darfield. And so there are quite clear parameters around its use.
So just to extrapolate on your response, which is a good response, why would we set up another committee when we've got a group of elected members on the community board who could probably fill the role? I mean, they often say there's not enough meat in their role. Couldn't the Melbourne Community Board be in charge of the Westview Fund?
Yeah, look, and I think it goes back to Councillor Alexander's question as well. That may well be the situation in the future. But at the moment, through the various iterations of perceived responsibility, the groups who have been identified on page 41 all believe that to some degree they currently have skin in the game. So this is around the formality. And then back to the answer I gave to Councillor Alexander, we're dealing with the current. The future, I think, personally will be different in terms of the membership.
It just seems that they have a little more legitimacy being elected members from the community than perhaps these names being put forward. So just be worth giving consideration to that, that's all.
Yeah, and look, I think where the transition will come is the last bullet point, where it's around independent membership, and I can see the independent member number being increased into the future.
Thank you. Those questions as remover and seconder for David's report. Move to Councillor Mugford, seconded Councillor Gallagher. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carries. And we'll move now to pages 94 through 114 and invite Douglas to the table. Douglas, so just run through your report like normal, and when we get to the Lincoln matter, we'll just deal with it at that point.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the first item is the aquatic report. Just an update there. Maybe if I I'll just call out the headings and just pause slightly. And if you want to raise an issue, we'll do that. So, Aquatic Centre.
Douglas, are we going to update the information boards outside the aquatic centre there? forecast opening times on those boards are now well out of date.
Yeah, thank you. I'm aware of that. I'll get that updated. Thank you. Tiara Tia. Foster, the indoor courts, which I know you've got a naming report in front of you. The Dines Road car park and club room relocation, noting that that project is now open and we're just tidying up the paperwork with things like leases. This will be the last reporting on that project. Brookside Road, Anzac Lane subdivision. Responsible camping and the tourism infrastructure funds that we've applied for. You can see we've made an application to responsible camping. It's a consistent sort of approach to the previous year. We're not sure at this stage how successful will be. And then a brief update on a couple of the toilets there under the tourism infrastructure fund. Just a general update on camping activities. We have slimmed that down just to the issues that we're looking at for the season. So we're all getting ready for that, obviously. The Surplus Crown Land Disposal Project, Rob's team just give an update where they're there. So it's quietly chipping away at that. Leaston Library Medical Centre. So again, we're progressing, particularly discussions on the medical centre side of things. So that's going into the next stage of what you'd call a developed plan process there on that project. Alright, Community Centre, maybe because it's topical, maybe Your Worship will just pause and perhaps Councillor Lyle and Councillors Mugford and Gallagher might like to comment on last night's meeting in Hororata.
Yes, I chaired a meeting of the local community last night. About 60 members came to that meeting where our staff gave a very good synopsis of the information surrounding the proposals for the old hall, the new hall, and the various issues that had been in front of the community before. But I think last evening was an opportunity to put that information to the fore and to the front so that people could really become informed about what the options are going forward. The information was well received by the public. We had updates also from Go Hororata and the principal of the local primary school, the Hororata Historical Society and the Community Trust. Many issues were brought up about the Historical Society and its need for a new house or place to go and its lack of funding, which unfortunately is quite common in our communities. And I think I expected a great deal more questions from the floor at the end of the meeting, which weren't forthcoming. So I congratulate our staff on the fact that they did a very good job of presenting the information to the public. And so we have assured the public that we would like some early engagement on the issues. Our staff are preparing a pack of information to go out to them in the next few weeks. They've been told the doors are open to talk to our staff about information and that we would really like to see fulsome early engagement in this process and in the long-term plan process. So all in all, I think it was a fairly successful meeting.
Douglas, just on that, there's a notion here around the dock conversation around revocation of the reserve land around the hall. Is there any further update than what's in the paper here? And I'm guessing that work stream is going ahead regardless of what the outcome of the funds are required, I suppose, regardless of whichever option's chosen by the community, whether it's retaining or building, either way.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth having a conversation for a variety of reasons. As Councillor Lyle said, we're now just so we'll be putting out another package of information next week to all people in Hororata. You'll get a copy of that. The focus now is on understanding the heritage aspect of the hall we want to retain. I think one point which didn't seem to be contested last night, even by the heritage people, was that the only heritage is what's the Hertz-Seeger original 1890s part of the building. It's only about a quarter of the building. I think people could see the value of looking after that piece, but the rest of it, there's no heritage value, and then trying to do something that provides an enhanced community facility in Hororata. So we'll be putting out about 2 or 3 options, and then there's a variety of pieces of work we'll do in there. We're looking to try and report back in some form to yourselves end of the year, but it's all getting ready for the long-term plan and understanding what proposal we're putting into the long-term plan on the community's behalf.
Sorry, it's Sam. Just a question, Douglas. When you circulate that information to the residents, could you please forward it to Councillor Mudford and myself as well, please?
Yeah, all councillors will get the information as well as the committee board members, so there'll be a full set there. With Craig Prone, so the key item on here in red is the work we've done recently on the Lincoln Event Centre with our view of where the building sits, and I suppose it's just a good chance to test whether council are comfortable with the approach we're outlining here, or whether they wish a different approach to be considered. I just want to stress the building is not deemed earthquake prone. This is just looking at it for some strengthening methodology.
I had a question. I know in an average event, people don't like to sleep at our community centres, but there are sometimes events where occupation of private homes is not possible. So there will be times that our community centres, our major community centres, have to be used in that fashion. So I just wasn't comfortable with the comments around not sleeping in our welfare centres because, for example, in a large fire event, or there may be people who have to be evacuated overnight or longer because it is impossible. And in the first instance, they come to an event at a community centre, and some, particularly in these transient times, may not have relatives, families to go and stay with.
So we have our SO welfare team would be more than capable and competent of doing whatever's needed to set up a facility to do that. So we do have that capacity. It just comes down to what is the general preference of people and what is easiest to achieve. I just stress one comment here. I think I make a comment that one of the future builds might be the one Prepperton to look at IL4. Now, if Prepperton just say hypothetically didn't proceed in the manner that we're thinking, and there's reasons why that might not occur, we may have to come back and address this issue from a civil defence welfare perspective. But at this stage, we think this is the best position to hold. And just a comment about Mead Hall there. West Melton Community Park, just a quick update on that one. And then Reed's Pit, if you go past Reed's Pit in any form, you'll see they've already got the benching, and the forming of the sides is going really well. So that project's sort of been a long time, but a lot of that work, as you know, has been done as part of the ability of the contractor to put clean fill in there and then shape it. So that's worked out really well. And Prepperton Domain with the pump track and overflow car park.
Yes, sorry, you beat me to the chase there, Douglas. Just the Mead Hall, you'll bring us a recommendation outcome for that in the future report, presumably.
Yep, that's right. Long-term plan consideration as part of, we would suggest 21-22, but that'll be part of the report coming to you in about 6 weeks time. The Prepperton acquisition land project. So Rob Allen and Bianca White are making good progress there. Some difficult conversations for some property owners, but everyone, including the property owners, are focused on what needs to be done. Sale of residential sections. So I'll obviously comment about the appointment of real estate agents, and happy to perhaps just pause and consider the Mill Pond Lane. I just stress that the key point here in the commentary about lot 7, so that's the land underneath the country club building itself. Good outcome here. Rob, we'll just pause briefly while I talk. So Bianca and Rob are just handing out, just so there's no confusion, that the plan that Ralph talked to was a slightly older plan. This is what's called option D, which is the one that we seek, where resource consent for subdivision is being processed on. The subtle difference here is there's no difference in regard to lot 6 in size. I think they're within carry of a metre, but it's lot 5 next door, which Ralph had circled. It's a slightly bigger lot, I think at 820 on this one, but it's just so you know that is the one that the The other subtle difference is the lane access coming through. You'll see cuts in the one that Ralph put down. Again, this is not Ralph's error. It just runs across the front of lot 5, whereas this one here, we bring it to the edge of lot 5 because we get a bigger lot that way for lot 5. So the plan, and I'll just start pause there, Your Worship, to allow any discussion on the public forum discussion.
Thanks, Douglas. And I'll just ask David to, the decision that was made previously, David.
I've just asked Naomi to go and get the wording, but just remind councillors that, as Douglas said at the top of page 109, we have discussed this at our meeting of the 26th of August, and we did resolve to pursue option D. So if we were going to suggest a variation to that, you would need to call for a council paper that would need to rescind that, but I'd also be mindful of work that may have started already.
Yes. Can I ask, how pertinent is it for the sale of lot 5 and what's its value?
Well, I'd like to be slightly coy because lot 5 would be now what we describe as the premier residential lot in there with its views of the Liffey. And I'm not sure quite how relevant the value today would be discussion, but yeah, it's a really hard one to pick the value, but it could easily be well over 300,000, one would think, on that size and that aspect. But that's just part of it. We will be looking to absolutely maximise the subdivision, which is what we should be doing. But these are unique lots, star 1 to 5. So yeah, I just do want to stress though, providing lot 6 as an additional reserve is totally appropriate. But financially, we will probably struggle to cover all our costs out of this development, which, to be fair, has been going since 2007. So there's a lot of holding costs we're having to work through and fund. There's nothing wrong with that, but it just shows you just financially where it sits. But we make decisions from time to time, not based on the financial return, but based on the community return and benefit.
My next question then follows through from.
Just microphone different.
Sorry. My next question follows through from the DC accounts held in the Springs Ward. For the purchases of reserves. Can that funding be used to purchase lot 5 at 300,000 and use it as a reserve that will benefit the DC from the Springs account for the benefit of the whole district?
It's an option for council to do that. Our staff advice would be, as it's been for a number of times in this report, there are adequate reserves in Lincoln for this type of activity, despite the well thought out comments from Ralph. Again, if you're wanting that, and we are looking, Rob and Bianca, at the moment, whether we need a wee bit of an omnibus report to tidy up a few issues with this issue. If you did think that, then you could make that indication and we could bring that back for discussion to the next meeting.
As we're talking about the Springs, not just Lincoln, with regards to these DC accounts, and while you may assess that there's enough reserve area within Lincoln, you look at the outlying subdivisions that could occur in small areas like Springston, Motukarara, Green Park, that all contribute into that area, into that DC fund. Then the purchase of lot 5, making that a bigger area for everybody to actually benefit from, needs to be looked at, in my mind. If the funding's there through the DCs.
I think that's a very interesting idea, Councillor Hassan. I'm looking at Mr. Scott's plan here, and taking 40 metres off it would decimate what is a 826 metre section, which is quite big compared with the others. I was sort of initially thinking, could we cut the size of it to make lot 6 a bit larger? But I do support your thinking about the DCs. I mean, what we have to remember here is that this is, as I've said before, this is a jewel in the crown, this site, and it's a site accessible from a lovely stroll through the river and from people coming to Lincoln to spend money in the local businesses and perhaps have a picnic in that site. So I would support that investigation of the reserve money being used to buy that section.
In my role as a local councillor, I need to report on the passion of the committee that they are supportive of trying to maximise the value in this position. It's a bit conflicting for me because I've realised there has to be a halfway house somewhere in some respects, and I've taken this as the pragmatic solution where there's a win-win-win where I think what we're sort of missing here is that the tying up of the country club site for the future, which is 4,300 square metres. So if you add up all the reserves together, you've got 0.6 of a hectare as reserve in that area. And I certainly understand Ralph's and the committee's passion around that might not be delivered in the next 5, 10, 15 years. But I think as a council, we're that intergenerational body that says eventually you're going to have a 6,000 square metre reserve in the middle of Lincoln here. And that's the big win. And I think the future options are as well, is that we don't want to tie ourselves into knots over it. If at the end of the tenancy, the commercial tenancy, at that stage in the life of the council, there's a group that wishes to use the building for some other community use, there's still that option there available for us as well. So I think we've come up with quite a pragmatic solution. And I think while I understand Hassan's and Lyle's comments, and certainly if that was an option and the money could be found to bring it into the public estate, I wouldn't be averse to that. But all I'm trying to suggest is that there is a pragmatic middle way here. And but I certainly need to reflect what the committee is telling me is that they are passionate about seeing as much land within Lincoln retained for the future as they can.
Thank you. And I acknowledge the passion of the community, and it's great to see a community with a passionate committee and members in the wider community. But I do support what Councillor Miller's just said, that longer term, and I do support the recommendation in today's paper that the covenant be put over the 4,372 square metre site so that council considers this in the future, and that long term the Lincoln and Selwyn district end up with a wonderful site in that site. But pragmatically, we have to recognise that the district has owned this for 13 years, and the district ought, as district councillors, and we all swear that we work for the best of the district, not the best of a single township, that we've got to look at recouping the costs for the district. We've held this land to have the opportunities of making Lot 6 a reserve, and in the future making the country club building site a reserve, or using that building for community use. But we owe the district to make the best use of getting a return on that holding cost. So I'd love it if the DCs can be used to fund the purchase of Lot 5 for community use. That's kind of meets what I said in my questioning to Ralph Scott earlier in the day, that if it was able to be purchased and held, then that would be an ideal solution. But I do not support it simply being turned over. We need that return. It's a pragmatic, it's a prudent fiscal thing to do. We have heard in our annual plan deliberations this year the strident call from our ratepayers to hold our rates down. We'll hear that again in next year's long-term deliberations. I'd put dollars to donuts on that. And yet, to achieve those goals, we've got to make prudent fiscal decisions at every opportunity. So I think that I support Councillor Miller. I think that longer term, eventually, and maybe Ralph, on your and my lifetime, there will be a wonderful reserve there in that area to the benefit of Lincoln and the district. But in the short term, we might have to be pragmatic and put up with a smaller one than possibly could be.
I'll come back to you at the end. I just wonder if there's anyone else that's got any other thoughts that they'd like to share on it. And I wouldn't mind hearing Douglas, if there is the possibility that 5 gets bought out of reserve development contributions, then actually the subdivision plan that we've got doesn't maximise the use of the remainder of the site. And if that's the outcome that everyone wants, we're in the middle of a resource consent at the moment application to do what's in front of us, and actually a change to the entire layout is what you'd be requesting to maximise the dollars if that's your preference. I don't know, Douglas, if you've got any thoughts on that, but 4 is it could be 800, not 600, which might make a difference, in the $20,000 to $50,000 outcome. Deborah, you have something else?
No, Mr. Mayor, except that I'm prepared to actually move that a report come back to this council with the use of development contributions from the Springs water account to purchase lot 5. That way, the money still goes back, Councillor Alexander, into the council coffers. It's neutral. It actually adds to the reserve. Remember, this is development contributions taken for reserves. It has to be spent for reserves or for what it was taken for. And we have had a lot of development in the Springs ward. And I'm going to move in that direction that a report come back to council with the use of development contributions to purchase lot 5.
And that the current resource consent be put on hold.
Yes. If that's the way that it goes through, yes.
That would be consent application be put on hold.
Maybe just to avoid any confusion, consent, the consent, Rob, just looking at you, the consent hasn't popped out yet, has it? No, okay. Just to make sure if the consent application on hold or the consent not, what's the word? Consent not actioned, just in case it popped out an hour ago.
Consent application not proceed at this stage or something like that.
Yeah, well, with the intent of what you're wanting, we'll make sure it's worded correctly so we don't action on it. So that's the way you resolve.
I'd just like to thank Douglas with regards to the work that he's done on the property report and how he has actually looked at retaining section 7 within the mill pond for future community.
I think it's more a matter of noting that at the last meeting or the meeting of August, this council actually gifted lot 6 of 905 square metres without taking it from the DC account. And so where's the rationale here? You know, should we go back and say, well, we want lot 6 from the DC account as well? To sort of you've got a bit of a mixed messages going on here. And I understand the process we're trying to get through, but I guess I'm concerned that we're derailing a long thought out and understood process and a really measured approach to it. And the pragmatic approach here was that we were providing a commercial return, a car park which allowed people from within Lincoln and within Selwyn to drive on the weekends or even weekdays and actually park and walk through Liffey and have a 905 square metre or 1,300 square metre reserve as well. And I'm just making sure that we're all on the same page here about what we're actually asking to do, because you're significantly reducing the actual cancelling effect of the subdivision. So I will, you know, as a local representative, I'm duty bound to support it. I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page and understands what we're doing.
Can I just make a comment around the gifting of a reserve? When council does its subdivisions, surely it has to be still bounded by the fact of managing DCs for reserves. And quite often developers will actually give a piece of land in lieu of a DC with regards to land itself. So has that already been taken into consideration?
Yeah, we were already providing enough reserve, even slightly more from memory, as we're required under the subdivision application. So this one is an addition. So 6 is addition on top of what would be expected.
That's okay. Shall we just move to first A and a mover and second for A, and then we can just discuss B, because I think that's where the conversation is. So move to Alexander, second to DPH, receive the update report on property projects at 31st August 2020 for information. All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. And then Mark.
Yeah, I was going to say, while I appreciate Councillor Miller's sentiments, we don't have to vote on behalf of a small subset of the district. We're district councillors. We argue And I think, Grant, you've done it very eloquently and very fairly on behalf of your community. But at the end of the day, we swore an oath to work for the best of the district. And if we have to vote against our community for the best of the district, then that's actually beholden on us to do so. So I am hoping to have some other councillors comment, because I support the intent of 5, but I'm also B rather, but I recognise the comment that Councillor Miller's just made, that we've already made as a council a significant donation to the community on this behalf, on this issue.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I haven't commented, but I will support your view, because I think, let's be honest, had council not bought this property in the first place, we may not even be able to have this discussion. We're only having the ability to have a discussion about keeping some of this reserve because that purchase was made some time ago. We spent some time debating setting aside 6 at the time, and that was the outcome we got to, and I'm still comfortable that that was the correct one. So I'm not in support of the motion of B. I think we've made the pragmatic choice, and we take a long-term view, and the long-term view is setting aside 7, which will be a remarkable addition to the reserve area. So thank you, Mark. I'll take on board your comments, and I will make a comment. So done so.
Thank you. Jeff, and then Malcolm.
Yeah, I'm not in favour of changing from what we agreed on last meeting. I think we should stick with it, but if, pragmatically, if it can be done and from DC contributions, they want to buy both, I think that's really win-win too. But no, I think we debated this a while ago, and I was comfortable with that, and thought, in fact, the council was very generous, extremely generous, in fact. And but we can always sit and look.
Thank you. Malcolm.
Well, councillors, when this land was bought, we didn't have a lot of development in Springs Ward. We had very little. We didn't have a lot of direct development contributions coming in. The pot was very small. The whole council didn't have a lot of money at that time. I'm sure that if we wound back the clock and we had the rate of development happening now, this land perhaps might have been bought as a reserve rather than out of the general funds. We wouldn't have it thrown in our face as we are regularly by a councillor from Selwyn Central, who seems to forget these things. We're buying reserves in his ward. What we're asking for here is a report to come back to council on the use of the development. We're not asking for a final decision as yet. And I would like to see this moved so this report comes back so we can make a decision with facts rather than assumptions.
David.
And councillors, just before you vote, I want to remind you that you've discussed this before, not once, but twice. Firstly, on the 22nd of July, where you agreed without dissent to confirm the development and marketing of sections 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, retaining 6 and 7. The matter was raised again on the 26th of August, and the outcome supported option D, which is the one in front of you, which again is options, as you were, sections 1 through 5 and 6 and 7 separately.
Grant.
Is the property manager able to give us some indication of what length of time option B would take to, is it likely to be next month's council meeting, or was it a larger time frame that would take for this to happen?
That's reasonably straightforward. There's probably, digressing slightly, I think that we have, the extra, I made the comment to Councillor Alexander about the Lincoln Trust. We did talk to the Lincoln Trust many years ago because there was a way we actually could achieve their trust deed issues. It'd be good to go back and look at that. It's really, I mean, it's reasonably straightforward, arguably. It's, do you want to fund this reserve out of the Springs Ward Reserve Development Contribution account, or do you want to use those funds for something else? Really what it comes down to,
I guess that's the challenge I was going to raise, is that inevitably when you take money from one account, another project along the list may be shortchanged. So we talk about the Prepperton Community Centre or the new Springston development or whatever it is. If you take it out, you shortchange another project, or potentially shortchange another project. I guess the staff will come
In a
back and
nutshell.
give us that answer when they come back with the report.
If you resolve that way, that's the type of information we'd add to it. I think the key thing is though that I don't want to be going to market with any confusion over this issue. So yeah, we're just not going to go there for the moment.
Great. Councillor Haston, and we'll round up.
Okay, thank you. Look, I have a query when it comes to distributing or approving development contributions within each ward, because they are ward-based now instead of localised based. Who actually gets, through our policy, gets to actually make the decision with regards to how these funds are spent within the ward? Is it the whole council, or is it after consultation with the ward councillors themselves?
So reserve development contributions get calculated based on the forecast that the council makes as part of its long-term plan for spend on reserves. So that process happens every 3 years formally. There's a bit of an ability to buy reserves that come up from time to time, but that goes through the council in terms of approval process because it's the purchasing of land. So yeah, there's the formal process that occurs on a 3 yearly basis. So one of the things might be, and again, if you want to go this way, one of the issues in the report might be we have to wait now till the long-term plan process goes through. We'll just wait and see what you come with, where you want to go.
Great. So the option is a vote yes or a vote no. No, you can abstain if you really want to. So a vote yes is to put this on hold and seek this report. A vote no is to continue with what's been presented here and have the subdivision continue, which to my mind still leaves the option open for the purchase of that lot, if that was to happen, because the lots would be created. So all those in favour that the report come back to council for the use of development contributions to purchase lot 5 and the resource consent application does not proceed at this stage, say aye. Aye. Those against, no. All those in favour of the report coming back to council, please raise your hands.
1, 2, 3.
All those against, raise your hands.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Declare it lost. So thank you, Douglas, for the contribution today, and we look forward to seeing the development and the vesting of the reserve in 6. Go ahead. Move back now to pages 43 through 51. Partial removal of designation ME14 from Selwyn District Plan. Rachel is here. Is there a mover and seconder for this report? Moved Councillor Lemon, seconded Councillor Lyle. Any questions for Rachel? All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. Item number 3 is pages 52 through 54. Deborah?
Just with regards to some councillors' clarification with regards to this, I just wanted to highlight that the Ministry of Education has been in consultation with the Board of Trustees of Springston School, and they have their approval for that to happen. So I just want to clarify that, sorry.
Thank you. This is the naming of Foster Park indoor sports facility, so that we received the report outlining the naming and approve Selwyn Sports Centre as its name. Mover and seconder, Miller and Bland.
I have
Any discussion? Councillor Alexander.
Yes, I would prefer the indoor to have been retained in the name because it's arguably not the only sports centre in Selwyn. We have many sports centres. We have Darfield. We have many large significant reserves which are sports centres for their sports. I think if it was the Selwyn Indoor Sports Centre, would reflect its use going forward. I'm not going to suggest an amendment. I recognise that I'm probably a minority voice here today on this topic, but it would be my preference that we reflected its true nature. It is an indoor court centre. It's not a Ngapunawai that Christchurch have built where it's a full indoor and outdoor sports centre. This facility is the Selwyn Indoor Sports Centre being built for the whole of the Selwyn district on land, by the way, councillors, that was purchased with the Ralston Reserve development contributions, not district.
Excuse me. I'm just interested to understand the feedback from Runanga and Ngaitahu, and gifting a cultural name, and where that sort of landed and how it isn't reflected in the name we've chosen. I was quite favourable to the Stadium Selwyn, or Selwyn Stadium. I thought it gave it a bit more presence. Selwyn Sports Centre is a kind of an obvious name, and thought we could have done better possibly. Thank you.
There have been discussions with Taumetu that myself and David have had with them, and they weren't interested in naming that facility. All those in favour that it be named the Selwyn Sports Centre, say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. Item number 4 is pages 55 through 67, and it's the consent to grant easements to Orion. Moved Lemon, seconded Mugfidge. Any discussion on that paper? Those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. Now the next item is item 5 on pages 70 through 82. It's plan change 64, decision on how to consider a private plan change. And just before you move, Mark, I'll just note for the meeting, previously I have signed a letter that encourages this land to be developed and to work along a fast track application process for Hughes. And so if council feels that there's a conflict by my name being on a letter of that description, drafted by our staff in collaboration with the work that we've all said we want to see happen in the middle of Rolleston, I'll take a step back from the seat at this point in time, but I've really just continued with council policy around what my letter has supported. I just wanted you to be aware that that's happened.
No, I don't have a conflict, Mr. Mayor, and I'll also move the recommendation on the agenda in front of us.
Thank you. Moved Alexander. Is there a seconder? Planned?
I did check with staff, and the response was circulated to this, and because it is outside the township boundary as defined in the regional policy statement from ECAN, but they clarified that the new legislation allows this application, this plan change, to go forward. And so I'm very happy to see the plan change in that context go forward for consideration as a plan change. It continues the onward development of Rolleston, and we would all note that post the earthquake and post-COVID, that we're actually receiving record numbers of building consents, and that actually requires land on which those buildings need to go. So we're to continue supporting that as a council and as a community. We need to have land available for that development. So therefore, I'm happy and pleased to be able to support this plan change progressing.
Thank you, Mark. I just note that a lot of what we have done in Selwyn and continue to do is provide land for people to build homes and come and live a great lifestyle. In conjunction with that, planning's taken into consideration Christchurch and Waimakariri's views on what it means to live in Greater Christchurch, and the government has invested a huge amount of money in Rolleston and in Selwyn, the motorway through NZTA, the number of schools that we've had open through the Ministry of Education, and that our future planning and reliance on growth through our long-term plan means that the land that's been identified within the infrastructure boundaries becomes available for housing, and we're keen to see that happen. I'll vote in favour of this. Any further comments? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. The next item is the solid waste manager, pages 83 through 86. And Andrew, welcome to the table if you'd like to take us through your report.
Hi, everybody. I actually was intending just to submit the report as we'll take it as read and take any questions. But I did think if you have time, I've got some drone footage of the developments at the recovery park, which I thought you might like to see. So, yeah, okay. So if anyone's got any questions, I can take those while I'm finding the file.
Any questions from councillors on the report? Grant.
Not a question, just using the time while Andrew's getting ready. I'm on the solid waste portfolio, just to commend our ratepayers for giving our counterparts in Christchurch and Waimakariri a bit of a backflip, because most of our ratepayers are doing their recycling the right way. So yes, good work, ratepayers in Selwyn. But please keep it up, because contamination and recycling is one of the biggest problems we have around finding markets for our recycling. And certainly the ongoing use of recycled materials is very, very challenging and almost ineffective cost-wise. You ready to go yet, Andrew, or should I continue? I can carry on.
Carry on.
So Sophie's got something up when you went dry.
Mine was more of an observation, just on the section that Andrew's got here about the Sustainability Forum. And I just thinking along the lines of when we're doing the long-term plan, it's probably worth us all thinking about how we formalise this a bit more rather than they do some fantastic work, but it is kind of something that people fill in as part of, on top of their normal day job. And it's a matter of pretty significant concern, as various polls around the general election are showing. I think we need to make plans to make this a bit more formal rather than just something people do on the side.
Thank you. Andrew. Oh, sorry, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to say, Andrew, your suggestion in the report under 4.2 that you take us on a tour of the recently completed works is a great idea, and I look forward to it.
Great. Okay, great. So this was some footage done back in September. We've had to try it out a couple of times throughout the development. Hopefully, most of you are familiar with the site. It obviously looks quite a lot different from what it used to look like, so in the past. In the centre here was the main structure, and then the weighbridge here, and then along the road here we had a recycling drop-off area, or most of that recycling drop-off area. I'll play the video and try and talk to it at the same time.
Can you turn your microphone on, Andrew?
Sure.
Thanks.
So we now have a new roundabout area here, which is to help traffic get in and out of this car park area in here. You'll notice in the background where my mouse pointer is that there's a canopy structure going up. That's almost completed now. And that'll then take all the recycling that was along the edge of the road on the way in, as well as recycling that was dotted around in a whole bunch of different locations, and consolidate it all in one area, which will be undercover as well. We expect to move from the temporary location behind that canopy at the moment to the new location within the next month. The area here, which is just dirt at the moment, is the future location for the reuse shop and Salvager. So that's going to kick off shortly around design. The area, the dirty area in the front here is just being seeded at the moment, but that will eventually become those micro enterprise units that hopefully you recall from the earlier days of the project. Then over here, we can just make out a digger, is the education centre, where the plan is to relocate an education block and refurbish it as opposed to building from scratch. Exactly, yep, recycled. And then in this large grassy area in the middle here is the area that's been set aside for a mixture of community gardens, also potentially seedling, native seedling raising for our old landfills and other areas. And then off to the side here, this fresh area is, it's just a small stub of a larger area that may potentially come down the track for the multi-purpose waste hub, where a range of different waste deconstruction activities could occur. So at the moment, that's just a small stub, and there'll be a staff room area in there, as well as the site manager's office relocated. I'll keep playing quickly. You can see the new concrete pad at the back for the organics shredding and processing operation. So that's been in for a while now, just waiting on asphalting for the front of that area, the access. And you can see the little stormwater infiltration pond at the back. That's probably the key oversights, really. The new shredder down the bottom there is the sort of the new toy in the kit there, which is working really, really well, about 4 times as fast as the old one.
And yeah, the site's just vastly different from the last time you would have seen it down there. At the moment, they're finishing off all the planting, the line marking, and the signage. So we're really getting towards the end of the first stage. Any questions? Or?
Would you put that video or have the video put on the council website for the community to see?
Yeah, we can do. Yep, for sure. We might chop it down, make it a bit shorter. Yeah, and add some commentary. Yeah, good idea.
Thanks, Andrew. You're really good to see what's there, and often, you can't see behind the scenes. You can see only what you drive past, and so to have that aerial view is really good, and just support Mark's comments there around getting it public. Thank you for the report as a whole as well. Is there a mover and seconder that received this report? Mugford, Lyle. All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you, Andrew. The next item is the transportation monthly updates. Andrew Maisie, Mark Chamberlain.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. So I'll start my report off in terms of the Transport Activity Management Plan. That's actually a very important segue into a lot of work that's been happening over the last month with the New Zealand Transport Agency in terms of lining up our funding requests for the next 3 years and all our supporting information throughout the country. That had to be completed by Monday midnight, of which we achieved that deadline. And so that arrow has been shot in terms of getting our initial indication to NZTA on our proposed funding for the next 3 years. Before that, earlier in the month, we also had to present to the regional, the Road Efficiency Group, who comprises of NZTA and Local Government New Zealand, and our peers on our case, to make our case for investment. So that was also quite a big task that everybody had to go through. Some councils turned up and did their best, others didn't, and so maybe they get the cross beside their names and we get the big tick. So I don't know how it works, but it was quite an important process to go through to basically tell and present to our peers why they should invest in the council and its transport activities. So I know you've been pretty busy, and you are pretty busy at the moment. I would have liked to have had a bit of time to go through that presentation with you, but I think it's valuable just to perhaps send to you offline, just so you can have a look in terms of how we pitched our case to our peers, and in terms of making sure that you can see that we're on the right track in terms of outlining our issues and what we are proposing to do about resolving them. It'll be quite a good then introduction into, then we talk about the more detailed aspects relating to the program that the staff are then working up from there. So it was interesting in terms of this process, because they refer to it as a dragon's den, and we literally have 10 minutes to go in and sell our case, and then we get critiqued on it. And interesting comments came back. One from the NZTA, who seemed to think that with COVID and the situation regarding that everything's going to suffer quite a big downturn, and in actual fact, they don't need to invest so much into people and their transport activities because everybody's going to stop doing things, which seemed to be a bit strange. But I obviously jumped on that issue in regards to Selwyn's case, in regards to how we see ourselves going forward and our projections around growth and what have you. So that was one point. And the other point was they also were concerned about the fact that how we evidenced our case. And generally the perception is that we do very well with our maintenance and looking after our roading network. And so why do we need to ask for more money, or why should further investment need to be made into our roading network? So a couple of little interesting points that came out of it, but that's where we're at the moment. So that's, as I said, around the activity management plan, a lot of work this month. It's the biggest month for us with strategic asset planning over the 3-year cycle. I just handed around a graph, which I was really lucky to receive from one of my colleagues in Wellington from NZTA, which talks about shows how the funding allocation works for the new government policy statement on transport. As you remember, we put a submission in about 2-3 months ago on the GPS in regards to what it was proposing. And that GPS has now just recently been adopted. Sorry, I didn't have a chance to get the info into the report because we didn't have it specifically at that time, but I'll give you a quick update on it now. So it was traditionally, it's basically tracking the way we thought it would. As you may remember, there was some main outcomes that the GPS were proposing, the draft GPS was proposing. That was around safety, access, climate change, and value for money. And so basically with the new GPS, it's pretty much sticking to the same sort of themes, but obviously safety has come up there as the first one, but they've split the access between better travel options and improving freight connections, which is one of the things that we argued the case on to make sure that, for instance, when we're talking about the maintenance and renewal of our rural networks, which obviously add a lot to our local and regional economy, that we've got the case to be able to link that to further investment to support that type of outcome. Climate change, they carried through with, but the value for money, they basically said, well, that should be intrinsic to every single discussion around potential investment anyway. So that's the sort of overview on it, and I'm happy to provide some more information on that via email to you for your further look at. So the other one there is the, we can move down the ones that haven't got any, have got some changes. Prepperton intersection upgrades, we're doing well with that. And I'd like to acknowledge the help of the Deputy Mayor and some of the awkward discussions that we're having at the moment with one particular property owner. Quite a lot of work's been going in around the property owners that are commercial, have commercial businesses in regards to what we need to do to keep them happy in regards to making sure that their business continuity keeps working and also compensating for that. So there's some quite detailed and complex discussions there, but essentially the designs are ready to go. They've been through their safety audit, and so that's sort of we're getting worked into the final design at the moment. So we're lining everything up for tender as soon as we've got the sort of the green light on making sure we've got these property issues well and truly under control, which I believe we have. Colgate Roads legislation, or legalisation I should say. We had a really good public meeting with Colgate residents last week, and thank you to Councillor Jenny and Bob for being able to facilitate that. It was well, I think it went well, and I think those that turned up went away with a lot better information and understanding of why we were doing, or what we are doing, and the reasons for it, which is really trying to protect everybody's interests going forward. So on the positive basis that meeting had, we're now in a position to be able to put a report to council shortly in terms of putting forward the next stage of the Public Works Act for implementation to go to the next stages, which is essentially the issuing of Section 23 notices. So that's good. COVID-19, well, yes, I think we all know now in terms of our bid in regards to a shovel-ready project for further funding for maintenance and renewals, or predominantly renewals, that was rejected. Appreciate the Mayor coming around and telling us that personally, and the consolation prizes. I really hoped for 4 stickers, but you only gave me 3, but can't win them all. But anyway, it just goes to show that in actual fact, we probably had the ultimate shovel-ready project, which didn't actually get approved. So that pretty much does it for me, and I can hand it over to Mark now.
Yeah, I'll take most of the report as read. I'll just make a couple of comments, and the road maintenance one is probably maybe of interest, and just put some numbers in there in terms of expenditure and what we've been doing in the last few years. So you may have questions on that, but this is the second paragraph is that the funding required to maintain the network has not kept pace with the demands of the growth, but also the wear and tear and use it's had over the years. I mean, just the traffic going on, is the pavements are wearing out, so we have to try and keep up with things, and that's what we're trying to do in the maintenance with the money we've got. So if you look at the resales expenditure and target lengths, don't quite meet those, but that's offset by the amount of money we spend on sealed pavement maintenance, and the sort of two go hand in hand. But just it's a real balance to actually keep that going. But and I know that making a case for more funding, which Andrew's doing, not sure what's going to come out of that, but we'll see what happens. But this needs to be more money spent on a network, basically. And the graph on the bottom right there just shows the cost of resales is trending up, but the cost of seal paving maintenance is trending up a lot higher, and that's just because of the needs of the network. And then the graph that's below that again, just showing the quantities of repairs needed on our network is just an increase all the time, and that's just because it's all getting older and requires more work on it. So, as I say, that's a discussion, and it's sort of a report in itself, I think, road maintenance, but there's lots of factors involved there. Yep, sure.
And I should have actually talked to this before, after the whole point of handing out the A3 with the graph in terms of the funding allocation that's come through for the GPS. You can see on the graph there, the bar charts, how it's changed between the three, across the three GPS periods. You'll notice that for state highway maintenance and local road maintenance, there are some lifts in that, which is good, and that's what we're trying to leverage off in regards to our funding application to the NZTA. But you'll also see where, for instance, safety has taken a big jump, public transport and those type of outcomes that the NZTA want, which is what we always have to try and work around in regards to providing a sort of a balanced approach to our bid. But that sort of gives you a rundown on how the cards are falling at the moment in terms of from a national funding perspective. Thanks.
Okay, not too much comment on the rest of them. Is that there's information, things like Untitled Road assessments. They've actually completed the 6 months of inspections already, so there'll be a report coming to council on the result of that, just being included the next one. And the projects are going on. I was just going to make a mention, road safety report that Jessica and Steph put forward. Just one item there, mature drivers is something that's been trying to get things going for a while and getting attendance there, and just putting out mail flyers, things like attracted sort of 2 groups of 30 turning up for the mature drivers training and education, and people signing up to more driving skills tests after that as well, and more training. So that's been sort of a real success one that Jessica's got pleased with herself with how that turned out, because it's an area that's been struggling before, but actually got mature drivers. And I'd say there's a few of us here probably qualify for that training, so I might have to sign up next time. It's over 60, so yeah. And that's about it, but any questions?
I guess there's a big piece in there around the finances required going forward, and how we link that into our current long-term plan discussions and match that against our community's desire for rates increases, or lack of desire for rates increases, and to still be able to afford to do something that is so key for everything in our community, whether it's getting dropping kids off at school, going to play sport, heading to work, freight on our roads. You know, everything sort of relies on roads and roading, and there's a pretty big hole that we've got, and it's just a legacy of not lifting budgets, as you've mentioned, Mark. What are you proposing to present to us over the next 3 months that you see addressing that hole, so that we actually lift to a point where it's not a reported overspend, but a meeting in the middle somewhere, or us lifting the budgets to the point where they need to be, and perhaps the realization that there'll be might need to be a reduction in spending, because whether it's overspend or underspend, it's still dollars that we have to find from somewhere.
Haven't really got an answer to that, other than it depends on what NZTA approve in terms of the 21-24 funding, on what we then have to do at our end. If we want to have more, how we go about that. So if their funding gets increased there and we match it, then we'll be that's okay. If they don't give us the money that we asked for, then we have to deal with that and how we make the difference, whether it's a targeted rate or increased share from council. I'm not too sure. I just haven't got the answer. And okay, spending it. I was just getting
yeah. And Andrew, maybe this is for you, like the lift in the green bar for local road maintenance nationally. Did that come up in discussion last week? You know, when you're presenting your Lions Den, Dragon's Den case, is there any discussion around that? And what do you think the likelihood of us getting a lift for the local maintenance?
Yeah, well, actually, when we did the Dragon's Den, we didn't have the benefit of the GPS being released that time. We did the Dragon's Den at the beginning of September, so we're all literally still in the dark about it. So where we have discussed pitching ourselves is actually within that increase. We feel that it is not a good move to potentially approach NZTA with something unrealistic. The point being that everybody else is potentially maybe taking that point of view. And through the Dragon's Den's presentations by all the different councils, the common theme was, we want more money. We want more money for maintenance. We want more money for renewals. It's always been a common theme, but it was even louder this time round. And there are, to be fair, other councils out there that are really struggling much more than, for instance, we are comparatively. And again, one of the comments that we got from the Dragon's Den was that, yes, Selwyn, we understand that you are asking for more funding and we can appreciate that, but we have a concern that actually your levels of service that you want to provide are perhaps higher than what others may be trying to achieve just themselves. And that, well, maybe why do you need that extra funding? And so we have to really work hard against that backdrop in regards to how we compare with other councils who are struggling in terms of that maintenance and renewal funding. We have to compete on a national basis. So, sorry, to summarise, basically we are going in with a strategy and an approach to say to the NZTA, look, we understand you've got issues with funding, we've got issues with funding. Here is a sensible and pragmatic level that we're coming in at that makes it easier for them to say, yes, we can join the dots on this, as opposed to basically throwing everything at them and seeing what sticks. So that's sort of generally the approach that we're taking. And I think they will be actually appreciative, from what I understand, of that type of approach, because everybody else probably be doing something quite different.
Thank you. Grant and Murray.
Timely that you just said that, really, because certainly I admire your honesty and integrity, and just reflecting on the shovel-ready projects, it seems that other councils benefit from the throw everything in and see if it sticks approach, because our pragmatic and reasoned approach got us nowhere. And you're obviously talking sense and talking logic, and it doesn't appear that central government's taking too much attention to that, because I registered my distaste last time, but it's been further enhanced when we got the letter back from them saying we decided to commit funds to small-scale community infrastructure. Well, where was the message around that? Never told to us, was it? I mean, we could have applied for hockey turfs and all sorts of stuff. And so you unavoidably come to the conclusion we're in the wrong part of the country. In Northlands, we should be calling ourselves North Selwyn or something. But that's a bit of a comment rather than a question, because they've got a question. The A3 you've given us gives us some significant increases, particularly in safety and walking and cycling. Do you think we can reposition our ask to see whether we can get some more funding out of it around those factors for Selwyn? I've got another question coming to, I'll just give you the whole lot at one time. Page 91, 5.4.5, Springston Ross with curb and channel. Just questioning how much of that we're paying and how much the developers are paying, because it certainly seems that whole road is being developed by developers, and in the past we've been quite good at putting footpaths and curb and channel in, and are we getting reimbursed for this from the developers? And I can't finish without channeling Councillor Reid. She's not here today, but is the footpath going to be at least 2 metres wide? Well, as long as it starts with a Y, ends with S. If not, have a think about it.
Maybe just take notes of the questions, or we'll just come back at the end, because there's a few others that would like to speak. Murray?
Yeah, thanks. Look, it's really just around the overspend, and we look at that and it's consistent, Mark, I think year by year, isn't it? We've got the overspend. I guess it comes back to a question for us as governors. When we know how the mix works, we should never really be comfortable seeing an overspend because it's unbudgeted. So what we really should be doing is having a real upfront conversation at the time of LTP, saying what do you actually need to deliver a project, not come to the end of the year and saying, by the way, there's $1 million extra was needed and we've spent it. So I think we need to have a process where we're a bit better about doing that. And that is probably realistically putting pressure back on us as governors to approve the correct budget, I would suggest. Because surely we've got the expertise there to work out what budget's needed to achieve an outcome. And at the moment, we just match it dollar for dollar for what we get from NZTA as a general rule. Fair comment, I guess. And perhaps that's, if that's not going to be sufficient, then we need to have a really good discussion about that. And say, well, if we want to achieve a certain outcome and it's over and above what NZTA tell us is our appropriate level, and we think the levels should be greater than that. And clearly we do, because, you know, we're experts at telling you that we think it's not good enough, and the community are always experts at telling you that. So, yeah, no, it's not really a question. Well, I suppose it is a question, really, is about what's delivered to us, the LTP and annual plans, so that we get the process as close to correct as we can, so we're not having to look at overspends each time.
Thank you, Shane.
Kia ora. Tēnā kōrua, Andrew and Mark. I guess I'd just like to support Councillor Miller's comments around maybe we do need to be making some more noise. I understand we want to be conservative in our approach and be taken seriously, but obviously from some of the past shovel-ready projects that it didn't work. So reflecting on the community, and from what I'm hearing from our community, they need support. They're prepared to make some noise. Maybe we need to do a bit more around backing them up and really try that approach. So I can respect and thank you very much for presenting to the relevant authorities. And I noticed just there's been a lift right across the board there nationally on local road maintenance and local, well, not local road improvements, but given that, I think there's a definite responsibility coming back to support the local district. Just in terms of road maintenance, there's been increased traffic and heavy vehicles on the roads, and I just wonder if there's what sort of collaboration there has been with local heavy vehicle associations to understand their requirements and their needs and how they are treating our roads. I wonder if there's a possibility there to work with associations or groups. In the past, I know Councillor Reid and the team had worked with the different associations, so maybe some collaboration there might help. Yeah, but thank you. Thanks for your work.
Councillor Alexander, and then Murray Washington.
Thank you. Councillor Miller reminded me to the question I had down to ask under 5.4.5, the Springston Rolston Road curb and channel and footpath. This includes the Rolston Christian School frontage. Just note a historic matter that we've been hoodwinked. When the Christian school proprietors applied for a resource consent, in their resource consent they said they didn't need to put a footpath in front of their school, so council never took a contribution. Now we're supplying the footpath to a private school, i.e. a business, at no charge to that school. We were hoodwinked. We should have collected a contribution for the footpath at that resource consent time. We, council as a whole, failed, and now the community as a whole are paying for what that business should have paid for.
And on that too, the area outside the high school on that same road, is that part of this piece of work too? The curb and channel where there's just mud at the moment? So come back to those questions, Murray, and then we'll come to the answers.
Yeah, look, thanks. I just want to take the opportunity to just to summarise a couple of things that have come up. We do have very good asset management information, and in the last two LTPs, we've put up very compelling cases and been very well received, and I'm very confident that our staff will put up another very compelling case for funding. But we've been pragmatically, as Andrew said, everybody's in the same boat. There's an expectation, there's a observation out there that our roads are in better conditions than what maybe our elected members and our road users consider. So to come back to two fundamental questions, and Murray, Councillor Lemon raised it. He says we have to have a conversation around the LTP about priorities. Where do you want to spend your money? If this is the most critical part of your expenditure, why aren't we looking at spending more? That's a discussion that it ultimately ends up with the elected members weighing up where the priorities are. So that's the first point. We do know that the general rate funding always causes issues with roading because it goes straight to the bottom line of people's rate increases. The second point is related to the current year. We do know that during COVID we truncated our selling season That, all that did was reduce the overspend. Didn't mean we would deliver our target roading, resealing. It just also meant we didn't overspend as much as we could have overspent by. The issue this year is, and it was raised at the last council meeting, you haven't approved an overspend. The reality is, do you want to approve an overspend or give us a guidance on overspend this year, or do you want us to say, stop everything, we'll stick with budget and don't come asking for more work during the year because there won't be any money to do it? So it's just a few fundamental questions to think about.
Thank you. Andrew and Mark, just wind back the clock. So the first questions.
All right, I'll try and keep track. Springston Roddeston Road. So that is a project that is approved in our LTP for this year. Yes, you are correct that some of it is to do with upgrading those frontages that weren't upgraded or part of the Christian School development. And yes, you're right, there was a gap there that they managed to get through. Their argument has been in recent times that they're now providing pedestrian access via the back through Foster Park, so they actually don't need a footpath on Springston Roddeston Road. But having said that, we're tidying that situation up because we know that's an important pedestrian link through there. Staff have done a very good job with negotiating with Orion to have that whole section of Springston Roddeston Road undergrounded in conjunction with the development at no cost to council, so that's good. And we're definitely not paying for the frontage upgrade relating to Urban Estates' new subdivision that's going on down there. That's their cost, and so that potentially then is a saving to us because we had dialed that in originally in terms of our cost estimates. In regards to your footpath width question, it was a standard 1.5 metre footpath because, as I understand it, we actually have the wider footpath on the other side of the road. But
now, I don't know how many times that myself and Councillor Reid and perhaps the wider group have fed back our desire to there be no such thing as a standard 1.5. The standard is now 2. And I thought we'd got over that and moved past that, and we were on this pathway to standardising it as a 2 metre pathway throughout the district. So I'm a bit perturbed to hear this standard 1.5 keeps sort of coming back up again, Andrew. And I guess let's save that for another day. Perhaps you might want to come back and refresh us as to why that is. But certainly, unless there's a change of view around the table, I thought it was pretty unanimous that this is the scale footpath we want to see our developers put in. And I guess just to sort of finish the comment, you want to reply obviously, but will the other places that haven't developed, as they develop, be required to reimburse us? So there are some small blocks there which will inevitably be converted eventually. Will we get recompensed as they convert?
yeah, when I referred to a standard 1.5 metre wide footpath as standard at the moment under our district plan requirements. So when we're promoting through our district plan the changes to the widths of the footpaths to increase them. And so at the moment, we can't go out there and demand that developers provide a wider footpath because they'll say, well, in your district plan, the minimum is 1.5. So that's what we're providing. But the increase in width is coming through with the district plan changes.
It's just thinking of the strategic nature of that piece of road and what it carries. It would be a pretty tight developer that would have 2 metres either side of their 100 metres and then down to 1.5 in between. Is there any, because if the rest of the work is ours, it's up to us what we do. We don't, we could go larger than what the district plan minimum says currently and then negotiate with Urban Estates to match whatever we're going to put in. I agree with what
I'd be playing the good corporate citizen card, yeah. Because you've got a really fundamentally quite high foot traffic area there, particularly going to Foster Park and the pool and the new indoor stadium, and I guess not only that. Well, I'll stop there.
Okay, well, it's actually quite easy for us to increase the width of the footpath sections that we're providing to 2 metres. We can make that happen. In regards to the urban estate one, you'll be surprised how can I put it, cost efficient developers want to be in regards to providing infrastructure that they will then invest in council. They would probably turn around like any developer and say, well, if you want to go beyond your 1.5 minimum standard in your district plan, then we want to be compensated for that. And so that would probably be a discussion at the last resort that we would have to have. But I'm willing to go back and ask them so we can get it all joined up. But I understand the point, and particularly along that section of road. I'm glad you can volunteer for that.
No, I don't want to go either. That's good.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you. So just moving on a couple of those other points that you were making. In regards to, yes, we've talked about maintenance renewal funding, and certainly our program going forward with the NZTA is optimising around being able to get more funding for safety. And particularly this is the introduction, as I've talked to you about before, about the Safe Network program that the NZTA is rolling out for Road to Zero, and certainly our program is basically capitalising on every opportunity that we can for funding around that. The same for walking and cycling, and this is a lot to do with, if you may have remembered, the NZTA agreeing to increase the threshold on funding on their low risk category from $1 million to $2 million. So we're basically going in there as hard as we can to get as much funding for these projects through that opportunity. I take the view, as I always have, is I take every opportunity to leverage as much funding from the NZTA to give you then the flexibility to either agree with that or not. But it's really working on that basis that if NZTA are going to provide their share, we're in there to provide our share as well, if that happens. And regarding, in terms of, well, I think that pretty much answered the question around what we were doing for the annual plan and LTP. So we're certainly taking a balanced approach across all those work categories, making sure that we get optimised our funding from the NZTA. Just in regards to the comment around that I made before around, you know, the approach that people have had in terms of let's throw as much as we can at them and see what sticks. In some respects, that was the basis of our process for the last NLTP, LTP with the NZTA. And we were actually going in at that point asking for sort of like 40–45% increases. And so we managed at that point to get something in the order of around 20–23% increases at that time. But that was a completely different environment to what we have now in regards to the issues that both NZTA and ourselves are having to consider in a COVID environment. And so the NZTA have already said to us, funding is going to be tight. Don't expect us to be in a position to be able to do what we did previously in regards to some of those quite substantial increases. And so therefore, that's where we are being pragmatic, as I said before, in our approach and being sensible and realistic, which hopefully will appeal to NZTA's good sense that we are actually being responsible co-funders. Other questions in regards to the shovel ready thing was a very different situation because it was working through a specific government, COVID recovery fund at the time. It had nothing to do with the NZTA. So it was a completely separate process. It would have been great if we could have pulled it off. It would have got ourselves out of some of this renewal problem that we have, but we just have to keep chipping away with it with the NZTA. So that's about as much as I can say on that. Heavy traffic, yes, we are making the point to NZTA about our heavy traffic increases, and as I said, the revised GPS priorities actually reflect that now. So hopefully we can leverage off that aspect. The likes of the Trucking Association and things like that, they're directly plugged in to the NZTA. So there's not a lot of point for us to sort of try and engage on a local level because they have that voice at the top table with NZTA. Okay. And I think that pretty much caters for everything that you might have been talking to me about or asking questions on. Mark, have you got any further comments?
I just had a comment about funding and Council 11. In terms of the forecast over expenditure, that gets reported sort of monthly in the financial. So there was a big comment on it. Maybe it needs to be expanded more and get approval for that. It's just doing what we think we need to do on the network. In terms of a comment on the funding and the GPS information there, I can see one big improvement. One way you could actually put money in maintenance is that if you look at the state highway improvements compared to local road improvements and the relationship to maintenance on state highways, those state highway improvements could be shelved for 2 or 3 years or significantly reduced, and that money just be put into maintenance on state highways and local roads. That would make a huge difference. You're talking about billions of dollars that could be put into. So I agree with having new motorways, things like that, but maintaining what we've got would be really good. It's like having a villa and adding a spa to it rather than actually repainting and re-roofing it. Have a nice spa at the end of it, but you're not maintaining what you've already got, and that's sort of what we're doing a lot of the places.
Thank you. One of the things we've discussed this afternoon has been around the costs and funding, and for Auckland, part of the solution has been a regional fuel tax. That's something that the government has said at the moment that isn't on the table for anywhere else. But we're just about to hit an election, and if it's not going to be rate funded, capital rate funded, or targeted rate funded, then it's about lifting the amount of money that NZTA has to be able to deliver around the place as well. And I just wonder whether your next paper that comes to us with a monthly update might have a bit of investigation into the possible money generated by either a Greater Christchurch fuel tax, which might just include all of Selwyn and Waimakariri and Christchurch, or a regional fuel tax, which would be a Canterbury thing, but I don't know whether that's got any merit to it. But just to provide some numbers back to us so we could actually think about what a position might be, whatever the answer through the elections is, it'll be a new government and a chance for some discussions around what might need to happen. And I just think lifting where we get dollars from rather than just being a ratepayer burden and a capital value burden, actually thinking about the user charges that the fuel tax would provide could be another avenue we should discuss. Andrew?
Yep, I understand your question, but to be absolutely blunt, that is too big a question for us to answer individually as a council. What I would be suggesting to you is that that question gets asked through the mayoral forum to the likes of the Regional Transport Committee, because that's where actually that should sit in terms of coming up with a consensus position on whether they want to proceed with a regional fuel tax. It's been discussed many, many times before, and it really needs to come through that type of avenue to be able to get any sense around it, because some people argue for it and some people argue against it, how it would be split up, what would it be used for, and all those type of things. It's a huge area to have to try and traverse and try to get to some position on a local level, even at the best of times. So as part of the Regional Transport Officers Group, I can ask that question through that channel, and maybe you could ask the question through your channels in regards to that, because it's probably a good thing to ask at this time and get an update on where regionally we may get a consensus on that.
Thank you. We'll do that. Thanks for the report. Mover and seconder for this report. Gallagher and Lyle. All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. That brings us to the end of our items in public for today. So thanks for joining us if you've been watching online. A mover and seconder that we move into PX. Moved. Great. Lyle and McInnes.
Mr. Mayor, I guess just for completeness sake, we should note there's no need to review the item in public forum because it was dealt with as part of the property report.
Correct. Thanks, Mark, for that. All those in favour we move into PX say aye. Against, declare it carried. It's currently